Greetings, dear viewers, and welcome to our program. Roger Ervin was a senior advisor during the Clinton administration in the Africa Bureau of the State Department. During his tenure, he played important roles in some of the most crucial foreign policy events of the time, including helping Nelson Mandela's rise to the presidency, as well as resolving America's intervention in Somalia and ending the horrific genocide in Rwanda. I'll be spending some time with him talking about current issues here in Ethiopia in this edition of our dialogue. With it, I'm Shifaralako, and you stay with us. Mr. Ervin, thank you so much for being with us and welcome to the program.
Thank you. You're welcome. It's my pleasure.
Now, the Biden administration has yet again resorted to issuing executive order imposing sanctions on Ethiopia. Some say this is tantamount to clear violation of Ethiopia's territorial integrity and vivid display of Western support of the TPLF, which the government has labeled a terrorist group. What is your take on that?
Well, I think it's been more of a common practice for the U.S. to do these kinds of things. You know, I think probably since the days that I was in the administration, that the you know, when there was the humanitarian effort in Somalia, and then eventually aid to Rwanda and other places, it became part of U.S. policy to you know, intervene when they thought it was necessary for either humanitarian purposes or national security purposes, as they did in Iraq and Afghanistan. And so I think that they view this as part of that that policy paradigm that's been set. And I'm not sure that in this case it's you know, the same priority as it maybe it did in other situations. There is government sovereignty to think about, and while the U.S. and the international community is providing aid, there are good guys and bad guys on each side of this conflict, and I think the U.S. has to respect that.
Now, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has written an open letter to President Joe Biden. In your view, why has the Prime Minister resorted to such a letter? And what's the message of this letter to other African countries, to the United States of America, and the whole world?
Well, I think he's trying to make my reading of the letter is he's trying to make the point that Ethiopia is a sovereign country. It cares about its people. It is not that the point of defending itself is to not attack the Tigrayan people in general, but to stop an illegal action by the TPLF to undermine legal authority in Ethiopia, potentially take down a democratically elected government. And I think that that's been the Prime Minister has tried to explain that in many different ways, and I think that this letter is a very eloquent way to do so. And I encourage as much dialogue as possible between the U.S. and Ethiopia, and this is maybe a way to change the dialogue between the two countries and eventually get a more flow-through method of communication, and getting both the U.S. and Ethiopian government on the same page in terms of how it deals with the TPLF.
On the other hand, Getachew Reda, the TPLF spokesperson, has also written a letter to President Joe Biden, or following the executive order of the president. Have you seen the letter? And if so, what have you made out of the letter?
I didn't see the letter, but I have heard the spokesman many times speak about this conflict and about the TPLF's position. And I don't think it's a legitimate position at all. I think that the whole point of why the TPLF is doing this, because they didn't like the fact that they were taken out of power 3 years ago and they want to retain power again. And this is their way to do it. They took 3 years to regroup and to rearm and get ready for this moment. And they are not going to stop until they get what they want, which is either a power sharing agreement or complete power. And I think that the U.S. Needs to understand that that's what's going on here, and to respect the government's right to defend itself. And I just want to make a point that in the Civil War in the 1860 to 1865 in the United States, the British intervened on the side of the Confederacy. And, even to this day, I don't think many Americans like the fact that the British intervened at all, and certainly intervened on the side of the Confederacy. So I think it's a lesson that we should follow. It's fine to provide humanitarian assistance. We need to do that, and certainly the government and TPLF need to respect the humanitarian corridors. But in terms of bringing both parties to the table equally, it's not really an equity issue at this point. It's really a situation where the TPLF, who is the incursion force here, internal incursion, has violated international law and Ethiopian law, and they need to lay down their arms and come to the table with a complete surrender, and to do it as soon as possible, so that we can save as many lives, not only in Tigray but in Amhara and Afar as well.
As a former advisor to President Clinton in matters pertaining to the continent of Africa, why do you think the U.S., as some say, is indirectly at war with Ethiopia? The U.S. has been giving morale boost, if you will, to the TPLF, while leveling all sorts of accusations against Addis Ababa, right?
Yeah, I think it's a matter of misinterpretation of what the U.S.'s policy is, or the U.S.'s position on this. I think the U.S. sees it as that there's a lot going on the ground that's really terrible. The U.S., if they're going to provide humanitarian assistance and other aid to the government, they feel that they need to be listened to, and that that both sides need to do everything it can to stop the loss of human life, whether that's by starvation or by the bullet. And I think the U.S. feels like they're trying to do the right thing, and an intervention in this instance is the right thing to do. But on the other hand, I think that they have either missed a point, or they don't really know how to handle the TPLF, and so they're trying to engage both parties to come to the table, and that's not really the issue. The issue at this point is to put the screws down on the TPLF and force them to the negotiating table, and also engage all the other countries that are supporting the TPLF to come to the table with the TPLF, and force them to the table so that we can get a quick solution to this. I think breaking the support mechanism for the TPLF really is the only way to do this, and I think that the U.S. either doesn't know how to do that, or doesn't want to do that for reasons I don't know, because it doesn't make any sense for the U.S. to even have even be seen as someone that's providing equal support at equal time to the TPLF rebels. I think it's a misunderstanding of what they should be doing, and there's probably some conflict within the government about how to do this. And the recent executive order, I think, is one that I think it's a misreading of the situation on the ground, personally.
What is your take on the Biden's administration when it comes to Africa? Many agree that the administration's misguided policies regarding Ethiopia may cost it the long-standing ties and a strategic partner in the Horn of Africa.
I don't believe that any administration, going back even before Clinton and Reagan and Bush, and the first Bush, has had a very robust policy toward Africa. I was part of the four-person team who wrote the Africa Growth and Opportunity Act in the 90s, and have found other ways to support. I used to work at the African Development Bank. I've been very interested in a very aggressive U.S. policy, economic policy, to bolster Africa and for it to become its own trading zone with the rest of the world. And the U.S. has just really not made that commitment. We've spent a lot of money. If we had spent the money we spent in Afghanistan and Iraq and Africa would be in a different place right now. So I don't believe that we've done everything we could to help Africa maintain a growing economies and a growing sense of itself. And so I think the Biden administration right now is proceeding along the same lines as every other administration, and that is a weak and a paltry amount of aid going into Africa to do the things that it needs to. And while we're spending a lot of money on some things that they think are necessary, what's really important is trade, supply chains, financial support, helping build financial markets. Those are the things that are really going to make the difference for Africa. And I know that Ethiopia is trying to do those things, and hopefully they can get back on track and continue to do those kinds of things that really matter for the country and for the continent.
The administration is also pushing both the TPLF and the incumbent to come to the negotiation table on equal footing. What is your take on that?
Yeah, I don't believe that this is a sustainable position by the U.S. government. I am not sure. It almost seems like they're on autopilot by just saying, let's bring both parties to the table. And that is inappropriate in this case. And I think if the U.S. were in the position that Ethiopia is in, they wouldn't appreciate any other superpower coming in and basically saying, okay, you guys are on equal footing, let's bring both parties to the table. The TPLF has been the bad actors for a very long time. Even when the TPLF was the EPRDF and they were in power, the U.S. did not do enough to help them either get on the right track or penalize them for some of the things that they were doing. I mean, with the anti-democratic activities like jailing journalists, jailing opposition leaders, all those kinds of things. I mean, that would have been the time to really do something. But now that they're out of power, we shouldn't be doing anything we can to embolden their position. And I think that we should be using the international community to bring all power and every bit of leverage possible to have the TPLF surrender.
Many say Ethiopia is facing against a multitude of international media campaigns, all seemingly bent on denouncing the government without looking into the realities on the ground. What are some of your observations in this regard?
I've seen this kind of phenomena before in the international press, and in this case, in terms of the U.S. press, where early into conflict, some media sources, whether that's online or in traditional news, starts reporting a situation and starts making allegations against one party or another. And then the rest of the media, the rest of the international media, the global media starts to repeat those allegations without any proof. And we've seen that recently with the CNN report on Humera about the 30 bodies floating down the river. And they start using terms like genocidal, evidence of genocide. Well, I'm never going to demean the press for reporting. I'm certainly not going to diminish the loss of 30 bodies, but 30 bodies is not evidence of genocide. It's evidence of murder, maybe on a larger scale than one person, but it's not genocide. And the fact that they have no idea who did it. It came down the river. They don't really know whether it came from this town. And certainly to say that to make allegations that the government is creating genocide because of this, when in fact a couple of the people on the ground were TPLF supporters, is irresponsible. The Washington Post also sort of had an editorial board piece earlier in August where they claimed that the government was creating a platform from genocide as well, and I think this is incorrect as well. I think we have a situation, to put it in U.S. terms, a civil war is always a knife fight. So it's a close, very ugly fight. It's the ugliest fight you could have, a civil war. And things bad happen. And those people who are doing terrible things will have to be accounted for eventually. But that's what happens in this situation. And the thing to do is to end the civil war as fast as possible. Firstly, and most importantly, putting pressure on the main party responsible here, which is the TPLF, and to bring this to a close and get Ethiopia back on the track of growth. But I think the media has been unfair, irresponsible, and many times have not had access to the areas or evidence to report things that become as inflammatory as saying that there's evidence of genocide occurring.
As you know, humanitarian agencies used to call for unfair access in the state of Tigray. However, none has shown the slightest, if you will, interest to help many in the face of looming problems of hunger in the states of Amhara and Afar. This is happening in the midst of repeated calls by the government to lend a helping hand. What are some of your observations in this regard?
Yeah, I think that that's true. I think there's been an imbalance between calls for where humanitarian aid should go to. I think it really should be in all three of those provinces, especially since the TPLF has expanded its zone in Amhara and Afar, and the government should be, holding people accountable for not the humanitarian organizations, also accountable for an equal distribution of resources. And I agree with you. It's not been equal. I know that Tigray is in a tough situation and they should get aid, but they also, the Tigrayans and the TPLF, have to be responsible as well, and not only to receive the aid, but to allow the aid to get through their defenses. And also the trucks that go through need to come back out to provide more aid. And from what I understand, that there are humanitarian aid trucks that have gone into Tigray that have not come out, have been used to transport soldiers, and that's wrong. And we've seen recently in Tigray and other areas where there have been humanitarian aid supply that the Tigrayan forces have been looting the warehouses. So as much as we want to talk about the government being accountable, the TPLF have to be accountable. And the humanitarian organizations need to be accountable to provide an equal distribution of resources to all three of the areas.
Let's also talk about the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam that Ethiopia is building. Despite the massive pressures to squeeze Ethiopia from proceeding with the scheduled filling of the GERD, Ethiopia has successfully conducted the second filling of its mega dam. It is also planning to generate electricity soon. How should Ethiopia proceed with its endeavors toward a strong nation in the midst of looming challenges?
Just generally on the GERD, that Ethiopia has a right to build that dam. Relying on old treaties that were negotiated by the British are not relevant in this situation. People, when you see some of the press reporting, or you hear some of the diplomats talk about this as if there are no other dams on the Nile, and Ethiopia is building the only dam that's going to inhibit, fishing rights and irrigation and all these kinds of things. Well, there are 28 other dams on the Nile. And so this is not the first dam, and it's not the only dam, and it certainly isn't the only dam. We have Aswan and other large dams on the river that make a difference, and Ethiopia has a right to use the dam and use its water resources to create electricity and other economic opportunities for itself. And I think that all the countries that are involved here need to come together and figure out how they're going to use this resource effectively, instead of how they're going to use this resource for their own benefit effectively. And, as we know, and I'm not trying to denigrate the Egyptians at all, but as you know, that the Egyptians have always looked down on the other African countries and think that their priorities are the most important. And the fact of the matter is that you know, most of the Nile flows through Africa, other than Egypt, and Ethiopia has a right to use that resource as it should.
What's your message to Ethiopians who are struggling, you know, in the midst of challenges from within and from without?
Well, I'm proud to be on this call, and I'm proud to work with the EACC, and I love Ethiopia, and I really hope that this crisis is over with soon. I hope that people can hang in there and help support the government and send a message to the TPLF or other sources of conflict to put down their weapons and come together to create a dynamic Ethiopia. I think Ethiopia has more potential than almost every country in Africa. And I think if everyone can get on the same page and look forward, like I think the Prime Minister is trying to do for the country, I think we're going to see Ethiopia be a world economic power. And I hope it happens soon. And I think the Ethiopian people over the last 50 or even maybe even more than that have been in a very tough situation. And it's really time for Ethiopia to find itself in the 21st century. And I really hope that this ends soon. And I hope that through the EACC that they can be a part of Ethiopia's future and that it's bright and productive and prosperous.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Mr. Ervin, for your wonderful perspectives, and stay safe. Take care.
Thank you very much.
Well, dear viewers, with that, we come to the end of today's program. Many thanks for your company so far. Until I see you next time with yet another program, it's goodbye from me, Shifarao Lager. Bye-bye.